And then I need to okay. Looks like that's all set up. Let's get started. All right, and let me know if, so it does look like Pratyush is going to join. So if you see someone else pop up in the attendees list and I miss it, let me know. I can promote him so he can chat with us. And Harold, just so you know, Pratyush is someone who's just been a kind of an open source apprentice through a program that we've been engaging with through the JS Foundation. So we've occasionally had some people that have been going through kind of learning web development, coming on and contributing to Webhint for a few weeks periodically, which has been a pretty awesome experience. So excited to have him join us. I'm going to go ahead and we'll just kind of talk a little bit about the sprint here. Hey, you're back. All right. Let's see. Excuse me while I find the right screen. There we go. Okay, so yeah, just kind of quick run through of what we worked on this sprint. The high level summary is we were finishing up a bunch of localization work for the core of the engine. So we had done stuff for the browser extension in the past for all the pieces of the strings that were explicitly part of that UI. And then with this sprint, we went through and we did all of the messages generated by all of the hints, along with the hint names and metadata. Now, we haven't done these specific localizations. This is just setting it up so we're all running through common localization functions and file formats so that we can do the localization work in the future. And so that's carried forward from last sprint and just got merged. I think yesterday is when we got that finally merged into master, and included some updates to our website because we had some tight dependencies on how we generate part of our documentation from the core repo. Other than that, we had work going on that Utsav can probably talk to a little bit around continuing to migrate our online service to kind of a functions serverless-based implementation. I know we picked up a couple pieces there to unblock that. Like this top item was some of the dependencies it had on the core hint package for places where we don't really need to pull in that much for a given function. And so we refactored some of this to move them to other packages to help support that. So we could just take a dependency on our utils package and not have to bring in all of Webhint with a default configuration and everything. Utsav, you want to talk to some of the other work you were doing this sprint?
The other dependency we have right now is also, we're pulling Webhint still. So I discussed with David yesterday on some strategies on how to remove that dependency. What we are going to do is we're going to take a dev dependency and during build time, actually convert it to like a JSON file of hints and then use that to fetch our categories that we need.
Okay.
That's just the specific part that I was blocked on, but that should be good to go. But in an overall sense, we had like, I think a total of 5 or 6 services, out of which one we don't need. The other one, I'll send an email out on this just to have everyone's opinion, but we are pretty sure that we can get rid of the configuration service as well. And replace that with sort of a CLI for the admin, and then the other three services are done. And I think we're going to leave the workers as is because of the issues running Chrome on functions. So should be pretty close to finishing this stuff.
Great. I'm going to interrupt myself for a second just to say hi to Pratyush, who just joined us. Welcome. We're just kind of going through some of the work we've done this sprint. And so actually, I'll probably ask you, if you don't mind, in a few minutes to talk about what you were working on here shortly. Now, Utsav, quickly, so it looks like for the additional work we already got done, we set up our first deployments using the Linux app service.
That is correct.
Okay. Then for the browser extension, one of the pieces that we did a little bit with this sprint and what we will probably be carrying forward with next sprint is trying to improve our feedback loop, both in terms of the manual feedback loop when someone chooses to engage and send us something, and then the automatic analytics that we're gathering to kind of help us understand how the extension is being used so that we can make improvements. One of the key things we did this sprint was we added logic to figure out when someone's started fixing hints so that we can have an idea of which hints are proving more actionable and valuable to people that are using the extension. And specifically, this is done in a way where, because we want to keep everything anonymous, so all the actual status of the hints is tracked locally. And then once we've identified that one's been considered fixed or in a fixing state, we just send up the hint ID with the particular state. So specifically what happens is at the end of the scan, we gather up all of the hints that were run as part of the configuration, just their IDs, and then whether they passed, failed, or were fixed. We don't send any URLs or anything along with that. It's just really about identifying the responsiveness to the hints. And so this is done to try to reduce false positives. This is done by holding on to locally the configuration and the URL used for the previous scan. So if anything changes between scans, we don't look at as anything as fixed. We'll just track kind of the past fail as a new initial scan. But if subsequent scans are run with the exact same configuration on the same page, that's when we'll look to see if something moved from a failed to passed state, and then consider that as a fixed, or fixing if a hint has reduced the number of issues that it's reported, but hasn't fully eliminated them. And so we're hoping that'll help give us some good insights on kind of triaging and prioritizing which hints are more valuable in the future. See, now Pratyush, kind of kick over to you for a minute if you want to talk about, let's actually start with the big item that I know you were working on, which was a new hint. And Harold, you'll remember this one. We talked about this a bit a while ago. You're on mute, by the way. There you are. I can't hear you. Okay, well, you play with your settings a little bit. I'll start talking to this, and if I can hear you, then I'll let you keep going. But specifically, this kind of bore out of an experience we had working on the browser extension, where we discovered accidentally eliminated the icons on our display summary elements by changing the CSS display property on them. And that is the standardized behavior because their display is display list item. But we didn't immediately know it because that's not consistently implemented across all browsers yet. So it proved to be a good opportunity for a hint. So we had proposed one, and Pratyush went ahead and actually implemented that this sprint. So is your mic working now? No, all right, it's all right. But yeah, so what we've got now is a hint that's currently doing just static analysis on the CSS for selectors that are targeting summary tags, and if the display is being changed to anything other than list item, we're raising a warning or an error. And then there's kind of a follow-up we're looking to do here in the future where we, obviously there's a lot of scenarios where that can be missed because plenty of people use selectors that are just going to be class names. And so in the future, we've got some ideas for when we're runtime, like somewhere in the, like the browser extension, we can actually bring in kind of looking at all the summary elements that are in the page and connecting the selectors that match those and getting a deeper view that way. So we'll be able to catch selectors that didn't actually have the summary tag as part of the selector. So I'm excited to see that one get added. So thank you for that contribution. Sorry your mic's not working. And then one of the other things he tackled was getting us some more consistent and shared styles in the extension UI, specifically on our error page for keyboard focus. We had not applied the same styles we'd used elsewhere. And so he refactored those styles into a shared component that we could then use in this place and the other places that we need it. Another nicety we had is for a while we had turned off auto merging our dependencies updates from Dependabot due to an issue where some of them were getting merged before CI had finished, which was, so they made an update to the issue we had filed with them, and so we got to turn that back on this sprint. And then we're now with the next update. So all these changes I'm talking about that affect the browser extension, we have not released yet. So that'll go out in the next update, which will be 0.0.6. And one of the requests we had from people that have been self-hosting it early on was to show the version of the browser extension in the UI. So we're putting that next to the powered by webhint text. I don't know if that's, yeah, I don't think we have a screenshot in here. But that's one of the things we added, which should make it a little bit easier with feedback to know whether you're on the latest version or not. And then we brought in new icons. Yeah, there's a types fix, and then we brought in some new icons, which I also don't think I have a screenshot of in this particular issue. But to kind of mirror what we had done for the design for Photon, where we had icons next to each category, we did the same thing this sprint for Fluent, and so now we have the placeholders to also switch those over to the Photon icons when we're done with or ready to get those implemented. Other than that, we have a few things that are still in review, but we're expecting to get merged soon. An improvement to kind of our, another thing Project Use did is an improvement to our inspect element behavior. Is sometimes that element's going to be out of view, and so we've added additional code to scroll that into view, which was a suggestion he made that I really liked. And one of the big ones, and Harold, this was from your feedback back in May, is we did a fair amount of work to update how we integrate with Axe. And I think I've got, actually, I think this is the PR, and I've got a screenshot in here. There we go. So this is how we're looking to expose the accessibility category. So the feedback before had been, accessibility was kind of 0 or 1. We had just one hint associated with this category, which didn't really do justice to the depth of testing that was going on here relative to the other categories within WebHint. And so with this update, we're actually splitting it out into the 14 categories that are represented inside Axe Core, and have grouped all of the individual Axe rules, of which there are about 80, underneath those categories as they're assigned in Axe Core. And so we basically just wrote a bit of code gen to generate the hints from the Axe Core metadata so that we could create kind of that tighter mapping and expose it in a way that feels more integrated into WebHint. Along the same lines, we also updated this to map the impact of the individual reports to the severity in webhint. So now you'll start, instead of everything being a warning in the accessibility category, if the impact is serious or critical, it'll actually show up styled as an error, with things that are moderate or low severe or impact showing up as warnings. So we get that distinction as well now. So one of the first areas where we're kind of helping introduce a sense of prioritization to what someone might want to focus on first. And this is something we'll look to continue to carry over into other categories. One of the things I opened while working on this actually was an issue to do a similar thing for our hint for detecting vulnerable JavaScript libraries based on the severity of the vulnerability. And so that might be something we look at doing next sprint. And of course, we can kind of go through and review and think about making a similar split for individual hints. All of this, of course, at the CLI level is configurable. And really, we're just trying to establish a better set of smart defaults.
This looks great. It's really cool.
Sorry, what was that, Harold?
This looks really good. I like this.
Great.
Makes a lot more sense.
This is a good suggestion. Thanks for filing it.
Yeah.
And then, along with that, I forgot to mention, we're also linking out to the DAQ University documentation then for individual Axe reports. So this will help with actually resolving issues. Before, since it was a single hint, there was just a link to a general web hint documentation page on Axe, and then linking off to all of the, basically linking off to the GitHub repo for Axe Core. This now allows us to link to an intermediate web hint page that talks about each of the Axe rules. This is also now generated, but it talks about each of the Axe rules that are in a given category, and then links off to the detailed information for each of those. And they're represented by the exact same text that will be in the error message in the UI. So you can easily follow from the hint that you see in the extension all the way to the detailed documentation on DAQ University around why this matters, why you should care for each individual rule, which is much more similar to how we've exposed other hints in the system in the web hint documentation. Okay, so I think that covers the high level. Oh, one other piece that's up top here is we did, for the command line interface, we had an issue come through that made us realize that there was no way to use third-party scoped packages as part of a hint configuration. And so we're working on updating our resource loader to allow that, especially because as new repositories like the GitHub package repo have come online, they require all packages to be scoped. And so until this is in, you actually can't publish a custom hint on the GitHub package registry, since it has to be under a scope name, and include that in a configuration that would get loaded. So just one of those new things that popped up this sprint. We weren't aware we had the limitation, and so now we're working on fixing it. See, other things, I know, Harold, actually, I'll kick over to you for a moment. I know you've been working on drafting a blog post, and you and Rachel have chatted a bit about blog posts announcing the extension for Firefox, and then I think we want to maybe do an announcement kind of in the cross-browser extension space as well. Is there anything you want to talk about there on how that's progressing? Or?
Yeah, Rachel and I had brief chats. I think she's further in than I am. She had started. Still the same headline I started, I think, a few weeks ago. Just, I think with the cross-posting idea, it becomes easier to write about it, because then you can leave the boilerplate to the first post explaining weapon extension, and so you don't have to reintroduce a weapon from scratch in every post again. I think this makes it a lot easier, so we can focus just on the Firefox extension and the extension idea itself and what people get out of it. So yeah, that simplifies it a lot, and I think I think Rachel and Gitter to share it out, and then yeah, I think with today I can get a draft together and also loop in the Hex blog post team to start slotting it in potentially for next week. I don't think we have a release coming. So yeah, if you want to get to quickly, I can probably find a slot next week. Otherwise, probably within 2 weeks, it makes sense.
Okay.
So if I'm hearing correctly, does it sound like maybe doing a generic post on Medium, for example, to talk about all of, just sort of a like, hey, here's the extension, here's what it is, do that one first, and then that sort of sets a tone for you to like do a deep dive on Firefox.
Yeah, I see a lot of the weapon posts in the past, like at least like half of the post is just like, this is what weapon does, and why how it compares to Lighthouse, like all these questions that come up, kind of preemptively trying to answer them so people don't wonder the whole time. So that thing that makes a lot of sense. That's my thinking as well, because then we can still like write a summary, and if you want to know more, you can read the Medium post, and then really focus on the practical use cases. Like here's how you run it. Like this, like how does it fit into your workflow? Like this really extension fits. You can run it on your own machine all the time, and then you can run it in CI and send results to other users if you use it online. So this whole like workflow that makes the most out of it. So it's not just one person using it, but the whole team.
Great. One of the other things I actually wanted to bug you about while I was here is trying to finish up the design and get some implementation rolling for the Photon side of the design for the extension. I don't know what resourcing looks like over there, but I definitely love to help someone get started in getting that rolling when we think we have someone available.
Yes, I have to check with the engineering team. Yeah, we have the same like summer hole problem as everybody. So people are just out all the time. Like right now, I think two of my 3 engineering managers are on PTO. So it makes it much easier for me to grab engineers because they're out. I see we're at, I think from a Victoria site we should be complete, but there was also an action item for Victoria and Stephanie to check in. So I'll check. I'll have a meeting with Victoria today. So
Stephanie couldn't make it today. She sent me mail right before the meeting, but I know she'd like to. Maybe it's something we can look into next week. I'll have to check with her calendar, but I'd love to get time with her and Victoria and Rachel and myself to get together and just kind of talk through any final tweaks we want to see on the Photon or Fluent side of the design, and then before we go through and implement those.
Yeah,
I'd love to get to the point where we've got the extension feeling as native as possible in Firefox as well.
Yes. Yeah, and I found an issue that I nudged. I haven't nudged it in a few weeks, but the problem of the icon changing colors.
Yes.
Where I got positive wipes that like we just want to enable the same functionality for all things, like because nobody's coming up with like why we shouldn't. It's like a web compet reason, but this is an extension. So
yeah, that's that specific SVG flag that's only available internally.
Yeah. Right. There was like prefed on at some point in Quantum because our screenshot feature was written as an extension and it needed it. And so it got all the benefits and like, but everybody should get those too. So I think I can make a case, and it's mostly like who will write the few code lines to probably remove the filter that is only applied to a few extensions. So I think that's that PM is also not on PTO, so that's good. Yeah, I can make that case. And the other thing I found was what Weapon is still running it occasionally for me is CSP issues.
Right, the content security policy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So we had a bug open.
I'll update for anyone who's not familiar with that, but specifically when running in Firefox right now, there are some pages we can't scan if they have a content security policy that disallows dynamic scripts or something along those lines. Now, that works in Chromium engines because they specifically exempt extensions from that model applying. So, and then the discussion is about doing the same in Firefox, which I think has been open for a while, right? And it's just, there've been various different kind of core pieces that had to be updated first, and now we're closer to being able to get that implemented.
Yes, that's the biggest chunk, the biggest refactoring of CSP itself has landed now, at least a few months back. But so I just pinged the lead from the security team on where this fits into their roadmap, because they're now like, because they fixed the biggest item now, they're probably in the follow-up work to addressing all these smaller issues that they can now enable with this new functionality for CSP, so they can actually treat content scripts not as site scripts. So that's something probably on the weapon side that we could be more defensive about in the extension itself, because like if basically the audit never finishes and then I open the browser console to check, oh yeah, CSP. So, and that's really harder because like, yeah, there's no many messages around.
Yeah, because I don't think we're getting an error back in that case, because we've added all the logic. So at least if we get an error reported back through the call to inject the script, we can immediately return. But I think that's not happening in that case. I think it's silently not allowing us to run.
Right. Yeah, probably need some additional quirks check, just like try to inject the script, get something back, and if that doesn't work, then fail quickly. While hopefully like we can, yeah, even when we fix it, it will take a few releases at least to write the trains to release. So I think we would still probably need to work around. I'll file an issue to discuss details, but I think that's because the experience right now, if we don't have it, it's just an endless loop.
Yeah, I think
amazing tips though.
With what you were just suggesting, I think we can improve that if we just build in a little bit of a feedback loop in between the components of the extension where it expects sort of a started message to come back within a certain amount of time, then we could at least shut down and give feedback to the user within a few seconds rather than them sitting there wondering if things are ever going to finish because the timeout otherwise I think is a few minutes.
Right, and in interesting piece, it happens a lot on, like we see this, for example, when people install things from AMO, and that's one of the typical use cases, but so AMO is the add-ons page for Firefox, but the add-ons page doesn't allow injecting content scripts because it has privileged scripts that they shouldn't be able to just text, for Chrome, but then people install stuff and then want to try it out in AMO and it doesn't work. So it's the same problem, like that the first injection fails and it just kind of continues. So it's not just CSP, but also places where the extension just doesn't work, like the add-ons page.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, so action on me, I will file an issue.
Okay. Then I was going to shift gears a little bit and just chat about a few ideas for our next sprint. I don't think we have to get all of our work items locked in right now. But some higher level stuff that we've been looking at is, let's see, I've got my notes up here. So we've got another team that's actually interested in looking at helping us get a CI extension started for Azure pipelines. And so we want to make sure we're setting aside some time this sprint probably to help with any questions they might have. And it's also possibly a good time for us to start looking at CI extensions and CI systems in general. So we were thinking we might take a look at Travis and Circle CI at the same time. It's something that's come up a few times, I know, as I've discussed with people, and I think as other people on the team have, is where we want to get this into CI, and of course you can use the CLI version there, but it's more work to get set up, and having something that's kind of just drop in, push a couple buttons, and you're ready to go would be really nice. So that's one of the things we want to look at. And then kind of the other area is continuing to improve our feedback loop as we kind of look to release blog posts and get more attention onto the extension. We want to make sure that we're getting quality feedback as people engage. So there's a few items we can do there. Also, one of the things we don't currently have is any telemetry on our VS Code extension. So that's one area we might shift gears and spend a little time looking over the VS Code extension so that we can get a similar amount of feedback from usage there as what we've established in the browser extension. And then there's some items like we've talked about the feedback link that we put in the browser extension, which goes to our GitHub. there's a query string syntax that you can use to pre-populate the issue template. And right now we're not using that. We're just pointing to one of our generic templates, but it could be a good opportunity for us to pre-populate a lot of the data that we're going to ask a user for anyway, like what extension version are you using? What browser were you running this on? And what hints were you trying to run? Because those are all things we have in our template, and it'd be a lot easier for someone to send the feedback that we want if we just set that up to be pre-populated when they click the link. So those are a couple of the areas that I think we'd be looking on, other than kind of continuing on any other feedback we might get in the browser extension. I think at this point, making progress on the Photon style side of the design would probably be the biggest browser extension specific thing I'd like to see happen. So, and then obviously we've kind of got the ongoing continuing work with the online service conversion that I know Utsav will probably be staying pretty busy with. But that'll probably give us more than enough for a couple weeks and then some. So, but if there's any specific things that anyone else was thinking of that I haven't discussed, I mean, feel free to chime in now or to just post something later on GitHub. But that's kind of the spectrum of what I'm thinking of for this next sprint. Cool. All right. Well, I don't have anything else we have to discuss now. If everyone would like to reclaim 20 minutes, we can wrap this up a little early, and then we can sync again later. Sound good?
Yep.
Sounds great.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.